Hey, Shira Lazar with Tim O'Reilly, backstage at the Innovate conference. Now, you just came off from speaking, doing
That's
the
right.
keynote, the closing keynote. You're just awesome to see speak.
Well,
He
thank
always
you.
has great nuggets.
I don't know. I like to say my reputation exceeds me.
And the quotes and everything.
I would say Oscar Wilde once said, "Quotation is a serviceable substitute for wit."
So you're bringing wit to the tech industry.
No, I'm really bringing quotation. That's different. That's because I lack wit sometimes.
Well, you've been such a trendsetter in terms of establishing, and coining terms that have become so kind of relevant in this community, and things that we've created and done in the future, like Web 2.0 and.
Well, a lot of what I try to do is wrapped up in this quote that I used in the beginning, which is the skill of writing is to create a context in which other people can think. And a lot of what my career has been about is pattern recognition. I look at what I'm seeing, and then I try to tell a story about it that makes sense of it in a fresh way. A really great example of that was organizing the meeting where the term open source software was organized. I suddenly realized that all of my best-selling books had something in common. They were about these projects that were written by individual developers that weren't backed by companies, that had these grassroots constituencies that shared their code online. But it was interesting, there was a name for it at that point, and it was free software. But the problem was that the free software community was a political movement, and they talked about only about half of these programs, the ones that were associated with the Free Software Foundation and the GNU project. And they never talked about things like Bind, the Berkeley Internet Name Daemon, which ran SendMail. They didn't talk about Apache. They didn't talk about SendMail, which routed email, because these were out of this other non-political free software community. And I said, we actually have to change the story to become more inclusive. And so rather than saying, here's this political movement to create this new free operating system, I said, what's the software that actually runs the internet? And I sort of did a very different framing, created a different context for people to think about this, and all of a sudden they said, oh, this stuff is really important. It's not fringe, it's really powerful. We all use it. And that was a reshaping. Similarly with Web 2.0, I asked myself and I asked the world, what distinguished the companies that survived the dot-com bust? And I said they're all about what I called harnessing collective intelligence. eBay, PayPal, Amazon was just really good at getting users to add value to their product. Google, people don't think of it, but oh my gosh, they harness all that link flow. PageRank was about following the links that people make on the web. Those are contributions to Google, and they also harnessed clickstream data and all kinds of other things to make better predictions about which ads would work. This was all about collective intelligence from users, and I said, that's what Web 2.0 is about. It's about data being used to service and to create new kinds of services. And so again, it's sort of reframing the context. And so what I talked about here a little bit was, as we move into the mobile world, it's really easy to think, oh yeah, we got it. Mobile, social, real time, et cetera, local. But we often don't quite understand what we mean by those things. And let me give you an example way back. I created the first, my company did, the first commercial website. It's called GNN, the Global Network Navigator. It was the first web portal. And we realized I wanted to stay private. I didn't want to take venture money. So I sold it to AOL, which turned out to be a mistake. And I knew it was a mistake after we sold it, because I was walking up and down the halls of AOL hearing modems going off. You guys might remember modems. That was a way that you could do dial-up to get on the internet, or to get communication going between computers. But people who were from the dial-up era just thought a certain way about how networking worked. And the internet was different. And it was different in some significant ways, and AOL didn't get it until too late.
And easy to stay in that box.
Yeah, and AOL didn't get it till too late. And I think that we're going to see some innovations in payment, innovations in the way our applications work on mobile phones that are really going to surprise us, because it will be so obvious in retrospect that the way we were doing it was wrong, that it was conditioned by the way we used to work. And I gave an example of this in my talk about where we're thinking about internet identity and privacy protocols and so on. And I thought, wow, when you think that the phone is a sensor platform, you can think very differently about identity, because your phone can actually know who is holding it. It can, remember how you, it can notice how you walk. There's a motion sensor in there. It knows where you are.
It knows about your environment more than you do.
It knows, it can listen to you. It can hear the ambient sound. I mean, it can put together all kinds of data factors and say, oh yeah, I'm not where, I usually am at this time. What's going on? And of course, that might be bad data, but with sufficient predictive analytics, you can start thinking very differently about the problem of identity and multi-factor authentication with a phone. And of course, you also will think about new sensors. Right now we have the bling tag attached to the outside of the phone, but I expect that kind of technology to be inside a phone eventually. And you start saying, oh yeah, there are going to be new capabilities which are going to allow us to have completely different interfaces.
And you also had a great theory for all the developers here in terms of innovation, which you brought to the table. Can you go over that?
Yeah, I have this thing that I find a little frustrating, that people tend to think that innovation begins with entrepreneurs who are trying to create companies. And of course, when government policy, we're talking about, oh yeah, we have an innovation policy, it's all about trying to create businesses. And I actually think that innovation starts a lot earlier with people who are enthusiasts, who are just trying to have fun. And the example I gave first off was the Wright brothers. They weren't trying to create airlines. They weren't trying to rethink how we were going to do transportation, warfare, all these things. They just wanted to fly. The kids in the Homebrew Computer Club just wanted to have their own computer. And some of them went on to become entrepreneurs. But the innovation started with fun. And that's why I'm so fascinated by what's happening in the maker movement, where we have Maker Faire and 80,000 people show up, and there's people playing with robots and sensors and new kinds of manufacturing. And I'm watching as their business is starting to emerge in this space, new kinds of robotics businesses, and of course we see that sensors have become, we moved from, people playing with sensors on an Arduino, which is a DIY little sensor platform, to all of a sudden the sensors are in, our phones, and more and more capabilities built into, consumer electronics that we're carrying around with us every day. So, the story was there. It was there with the enthusiasts. And the same thing is true. I didn't use this example in my talk because it's a little far afield, but you look at DIY bio. There's this thing called biology.
Yeah, I got that.
And there's this thing called the International Genetically Engineered Machines Competition with high school kids doing gene engineering. And you go, whoa.
Well, it starts with the hobbyists, and then if they can, they step back and they go, okay, how can we create this into a legitimate business model?
Well, exactly. And so, so a great example in, I don't think he was an iGEM participant, but famous geneticist at Harvard, George Church, told me that he thinks the company that his bet is the most likely to reach the sub $1,000 full genome sequence is a company called Halcyon Molecular.
Okay.
And Halcyon was started by a kid who was not a biologist. He just had a crazy idea. He did his research using Google Scholar. He begged and borrowed time on electron microscopes. He has a very innovative approach that nobody else had thought of. And he was just kind of an enthusiast. And now he's got funded and has a real company. But it does start with people out there on the edge. And so with the name of this conference being Innovate, I think one of the things I wanted to remind people of is that we're in a time of enormous ferment. The device is really changing the interface paradigms, it's changing the opportunities, it's changing the players. We would really love to have it be an open ecosystem for payment, and that's one reason why I think that PayPal is so important, because they're a neutral party. They do what they do really, really well, but they don't have any aspirations to own the entire internet platform. One of the things that I worry about very much on this next phase of the internet is you see players who own too many of the pieces.
And we won't go there.
I don't want to name any particular companies.
The middlemen there.
But you can kind of see, when somebody, we saw this, history with Microsoft, when somebody owns too much of the ecosystem, they start to choke off innovation. And when you have a multiplayer, rich ecosystem of cooperating players, then you tend to have more innovation. So I love seeing, PayPal and Facebook cooperating, for example, because they're two players who have really great best-of-breed solutions that are not the entire universe. Facebook doesn't have its own phone platform, doesn't have its own backend.
Right?
PayPal doesn't. Versus kind of vertical integration.
Yeah.
Everything from the hardware platform all the way up to the cloud data centers, because if we end up locked into one company's world, innovation will eventually suffer.
There you go. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for your time and for being here. I know you have a book signing, right?
I do. Thank you very much.